Kia ora koutou katoa. Welcome to Business is Boring. Wool is an amazing natural fibre, and New Zealand is one of the greenest places to produce it, though it's less and less important to our economy. Today's guest grew up on a sheep farm and saw the decline happen to the industry and the rise of synthetics. But when Derelee Potroz-Smith had a child and looked at the world of nappies, she thought something had to change. Each disposable nappy contains the equivalent of a cup of crude oil in synthetic materials, and every minute, hundreds of thousands are thrown out around the world. The search for a better alternative took her to wool, and over 15 years, Derelee has developed a company, industry relationships science, and 2 patented products that use wool for nappies and personal hygiene products, using chemistry to make a water-resistant wool 25 times more absorbent. Woolchemy, the company she is co-founder and CEO of, has recently closed a $1.5 million funding round to take this technology to the world and hopefully help find new markets for New Zealand heavy wool. To talk the journey, Derelee Potroz-Smith joins us now. Tēnā koe, thank you for being here.
Kia ora. Thanks, Simon.
Hey, so first up, tell us about that background in wool and farming, as it kind of charts like towards the kind of high points where you were beginning, right? And then you've seen the decline and change in the industry.
Yeah, so I grew up in a very rural, small community about an hour north of New Plymouth in a place called Morco, and it's right on the west coast. An absolutely beautiful place. It is a very rural area though, so sheep farming, sheep and beef farming was very, very common. And that was my early childhood, was around that sort of environment. I guess my family was very typical for most farming families, intergenerational. So I'm like 6th generation Polish in New Zealand. My mother was English. And so farming's been in my blood for a very, very long time. But as you said, there has been a decline over that time. So I remember in 1989, 50% of our income came from the wool clip. And then literally overnight, within 6 months, it dropped to 10%.
Yeah, wow. What does that do for a farm and for a way of life?
Yeah, I mean, I had a really good childhood, but I definitely recall some very fractious times where it was really, really tough. And we never really went without, but we didn't go anywhere either. And so it was something that was always discussed in our family. What are we going to do about wool? What can we put it in that will ensure that it's going to be with us forever?
And it's amazing, right, that it's been such an important fibre and textile for millennia, right? And then just in the last kind of 40 years, wool carpets have been supplanted. So that was a huge part of what New Zealand wool was used for, was carpet around the world, and then synthetics took that away. And then also, of course, like textiles and clothing and the like, and replaced mainly by plastics, which is kind of bananas, right? And then you hear these stories, like even to the very, very, very recently, of farmers having to only really shear sheep for humane reasons, and then burying the wool rather than selling it. What an amazing turnaround.
Yeah, it makes me very, very sad. It's just something that should never have happened. I mean, in 1950s, wool was the backbone of our country, and for farmers, wool used to bring in 80% of their income. And then, it's now 80% meat and 20% wool, and farmers aren't even recouping the cost. It costs more to shear sheep than it is to actually sell the wool, and so farmers have become really despondent.
And you've seen these conversions of high country sheep farms, which are a lot less environmentally intensive than dairy, converted to dairy, and all kinds of non-economic farming turned to dairy with great use of nitrogen and fertilizer and all the rest of it, water, to make it possible. Well, sheep are a very much lighter touch on the environment, right?
Yes, and wool actually is 50% carbon. And it's something that we have never ever acknowledged, that wool potentially is a carbon sequestration for us. I know there is a study happening right now. Some scientists are looking at that. But what an incredible product, which can just go back into the ground. In fact, wool contains 5 of the 7 nutrients that you need to support plant growth. The other 2 are sunlight and water, which we have plenty of here in New Zealand. So, what an incredible product that can go back into the earth and support plant life.
And while there have been some bright lights, like Merino, the people at New Zealand Merino, done an amazing job of creating some high-value kind of product chains, right? Heavy wool, that hasn't had the same resurgence. Can you help us understand kind of what heavy wool is and what kind of size of the industry that would be?
So we actually call it either coarse wool or strong wool. And everyone thinks of Merino. It's been a branded, marketed product. Coarse wool has the same qualities, but not many people realise that 90% of our wool clip is actually strong wool. So people come to us and often ask about, can I use merino wool in this new product? And I often ask, why not strong wool? I think our 6% of the superfine wool here is already taken up with lots of other products. We actually need more innovation in products using the strong wool, which is just, going to waste. So there's this missed opportunity there to actually use the strong wool. And if you think back to, many years, your great-grandmother probably knitted a very scratchy jersey, and that would have been made of the strong wool, which is like a cross, they also call it crossbreed wool. It was very scratchy, the way they kind of made it. But now you can make very soft fabrics out of strong wool. And it really just comes down to the manufacturing capability that you use. You can actually make it quite soft and durable and really lovely next to the skin.
And so you kind of knew about and loved the world of wool and had grown up in a house that was wondering, what can we do with it? Tell me about the thing that made you kind of decide to chase it down with Woolchemy. Tell me about that kind of realisation you had with nappies.
Well, I actually went to university and did an engineering degree, and then I went into the IT industry. And when I finally left that industry to go and have children, and I was probably a bit later in life having children, my first child I had at 31, I knew that I was using a lot of disposable nappies, and I did try cloth nappies as well, but my first child had a lot of nappy rash against his skin. And so I would always use disposable nappies. And I knew there was a lot of waste. So a baby will go through between 4,000 to 6,000 nappies in their lifetime until they're potty trained. And we're actually seeing that children are becoming older to potty train. So when I was potty trained, I was maybe 18 months old. My children were more like 3.5 years old. And then I had a bedwetting son till he was about 13. So I was using a lot of these products and then throwing them away. So that actually caused a bit of an eco-anxiety attack for me, but actually more so when I actually discovered what was in these products, and that started this journey. So I remember my mum coming down and, as per usual, always talking about wool and looking and thinking about, what product could we make that would help a wool revival. And my only answer to her was, look, I think if we're going to help the wool industry, it has to be a product which people don't keep forever. It sounds awful, but it has to be something that people are going to want constant demand for. So it needs to have something it needs to be something of a short shelf life. People need it every single day. It's a necessity item, something that people have to buy even in a recession. That's how we're going to solve the woes of the wool industry. And at that time, she said to me, as I was changing my son's nappy, she said, well, you go through a lot of disposable nappies. And I said, I know, and I feel terrible. I don't even know what is in these products, to be honest. But they can't be bad. It feels like you wrap them up into a big ball, and then I just throw them in the wheelie bin. At one point, I was trying to recycle them. I used to take them to Pack and Save in a big rubbish bag, dump them in a big major sort of wheelie bin, and they used to get taken away and supposedly composted. So I felt a bit better about that. But actually, when I actually dug a little bit closer into the research, that's where I found out that National Geographic had mentioned that each nappy contained a cup of crude oil, which was just horrifying to me. And when I looked at even a little bit closer, I brought out some statistics. 248 million barrels of crude oil make 167 billion disposable nappies every year, producing 38 million tonnes of solid waste. And, when you know that, you can't unknow it. and I could have easily just said, not my problem. That's going to be someone else's problem. But I realised this is the legacy we're leaving to our children. We're just going to pass it on to somebody else. So who am I not to actually do something about this? I have the engineering background. I'm a mother. I represent 50% of the population that use feminine hygiene products. There's a terrible statistic that 1 in 3 women have experienced incontinence at some point. People that have diabetes will have symptoms of incontinence. These are things that people don't really want to talk about, but it's out there. And these products that you use every day are made of this plastic. And then, of course, the plastic, we think we throw it away into the landfill where it stays there, but actual fact, it then breaks up into tiny pieces, ends up in our oceans. We're now breathing these microplastics in the air. And then we're actually finding these microplastics in our body. So I actually think we're on the brink of discovering that microplastics are the next tobacco issue. And we've got to do something about it. And wool has amazing qualities that could actually solve part of this issue.
How do you go from that realization to chasing down, making wool, which is kind of famously water resistant, right? Like one of its best qualities of wool is you wear it tramping or something and the water will wick off it. And merino, a lot of its use cases are very much in that space. How do you go about helping to make wool into something that can be absorbent?
Well, wool actually has a very complex structure, and more so than probably any other natural fibre. So there's lots of things that wool is famous for. And yes, typically a merino garment like what I'm wearing today is really good at moisture wicking. And so with the actual wool fibre structure, what you'll find is the internal part of wool is actually quite absorbent, but the outer part is not. There are lots of textile chemistry which will actually strip off the outside of the wool fibre in order to make it more absorbent. But that is not a very eco-friendly process. And so when we did start looking at, could we put wool inside nappies? I mean, when I was growing up, wool was used on the outside of the nappy to keep you warm and dry. And our sort of question was, what could we actually make it absorbent? And when I started talking to scientists at Agri Research, I started to learn a lot more about how wool is constructed from a molecular perspective. And so the question was, if we could do something about the outer part without completely destroying it or using nasty chemicals to expose that layer, wool could actually be absorbent. And so the brief to the scientists were, we need to work out a way to make wool absorbent without it harming the environment. And the scientists said, if you wanted to do something really, that was really nasty, we could do this tomorrow. But obviously that's not going to fly. And I said, no, it's not. So it took 2 years to actually develop that technology. And actually what we do is we've got a patented biotech process that actually alters the molecular structure of the wool fibre. So it's a very simple, clever process that uses organic chemistry. So a major component of what we use is a byproduct of another agricultural industry. So there's plenty of this material around the world, but we use it to alter the molecular structure of the wool fibre, and that actually breaks some bonds, very important bonds that actually makes wool absorbent, and then resets them. So what you get is a material that, in particular this material I've got in front of me, which is a needle punch felted material. Typically, they would only absorb 30% of its weight and moisture, and for that material alone, we'll do over 1,000%, so 10 times more. If you do it in a loose structure, you can get up to that 2,500% absorbency. So I think there's a lot of work to do around the structure of the fabrics that we use. But it's really exciting because now we can put wool into markets where it's never ever existed before. And of course, hygiene being a big major issue in terms of impact to the environment, but where there is a huge focus on health and well-being, wool has a part to play there.
You mentioned the agri-research experience. Like, how has your experience been going and working with government and industry bodies to build out this technology? Because there's so many people who really love the wool industry, right? And are sad for the way that it's fallen from usage in so many places. And you've managed to do a lot of stuff that's never been done before.
Yeah. And probably people thought we were a bit crazy at the beginning, to be honest. Imagine going to pitch an idea where you wanted to put wool inside a nappy, and you're pitching this to a table of men, probably late 60s.
Or called Trevor.
And there's maybe one woman in the room, and then a young dad. And the woman and the young dad totally understand it, and the others go, this is so left field and crazy. We're just not sure whether this is going to fly. And my response to that at the time was, look, we used to have a wool board, and we used to give a wool levy amount of money to the wool board. It was a certain amount, it was like 3 cents for every kilo of wool you produced. Farmers would give that to the wool board, and the wool board's job was to find contracts and to find ideas to use wool. And of course, then the farmers voted against that because they couldn't see that the wool board was doing anything. And so that all stopped. But my response was, so this particular fund that we looked at, it was actually funds left over from the wool levy fund. And they sort of said to me, have you got anything else left to say? And I said, all I can tell you is my family actually contributed to that wool levy fund. I think over our lifetime, it was like maybe $75,000 at the time, over probably maybe 20 years, 30 years. I said, the least you could do is just give that back. Give it back to me, and I'm going to do some amazing stuff with it. We're going to spend this with some world-class scientists that we have here in New Zealand that understand wool, and we're going to do something with it. And that was the first move where people went, okay, it is a bit left field idea, but who are we to stop this dream?
It's so cool, and we'll be back in a moment with Derelee to talk how she built Woolchemy, got the science together, and has products ready to take to the world. Hoki mai anō, welcome back to Business is Boring, where we're chatting with Derelee Potroz-Smith from Woolchemy. So tell me where you are today with the products, as you've got kind of 2 separate products with different attributes. What are they for?
Yeah, so we first developed Newsorb, which was our absorbent material, which we basically just took some machinery that's already here in New Zealand and made some felted wool, and then we put it through our amazing, beautiful chemistry to make wool absorbent. And so that has a lot of uses for anything that you need to absorb, either a chemical, water, urine, blood, can do lots of different things. And so cloth nappy inserts is one application. And there's a big craze around washable period underwear at the moment, which I think will be with us for forever now.
And kind of, sorry to interrupt, and kind of was with us forever prior, right? We've just had like a 30, 40-year collective go mad in consumer economies.
And so, that's actually part of our philosophy is, we've complicated our lives so much. All we need to do is actually look back in the history and past and see how things were done, but just make them better. And that's why we look at leveraging nature, but we just use modern science to make it supernatural. And that's what we've done with our Newsall product. So we are trialling that with companies that are in that hygiene space where you want something washable. And it works extremely well because you're essentially replacing, microfiber materials that are usually made of polyester, which is fossil fuels, with something natural. And then that led on to us looking at a much lightweight material. Now, for you, the listeners won't see this unless they see the video, but, imagine a material that looks like a wet wipe. And we've actually been able to put coarse wool into it, and it feels really, really soft. This is actually a world first. No one's ever put wool into these types of machines. These are still a non-woven felted materials. So the great thing about non-woven materials, both of these are sort of a felted process. It's a very low processing in terms of manufacturing, and so we can talk about a lower carbon footprint. These are just big, massive machines that you put wool fibre in, and it comes out the other end as on a big roll of materials, which works how hygiene materials actually work for nappies and other incontinence and feminine hygiene products. But that was actually a real first for us. And interesting story on that was we basically deconstructed a nappy. And nappies are very highly engineered products. They look very simple, but every single layer in there is about 4 or 5 layers. They each have a particular function. So obviously you've got the absorption part, but the top sheet, you want it to be water repelling. So you don't want to hold on to any moisture because that is what causes rashes against skin. The next layer under that, the second layer down, is what they call a acquisition distribution layer, which is just a moisture distributing layer. We know that wool wicks moisture, and that's where we've put the wool, is in that second layer. And what we found is if you take out that layer and you put in our wool layer, we can actually improve the performance of those nappies by up to 40%. So you've got this sustainable story of replacing plastic, so that layer would normally be made of polyethylene. So we can make it completely bio-based. In fact, we're the first company in the world to make a bio-based acquisition layer. And so that's where, we're very lucky to be in a space where there aren't really any competitors in that space. And it's a high-functioning layer that actually makes a huge difference to the health and well-being for a baby. And we believe is the answer to helping babies sleep through the night. We haven't fully, proven that out because there's really been no studies on nappies really around the space. But if you look at how wool works in a garment next to your skin, you would wear that because, even if you're wet, you're going to still feel warm and dry. And the same thing actually works inside a nappy. You want to feel dry if you're feeling wet. And babies will wake up in the night when they feel discomfort or they're hungry. So by just replacing that layer, we can have a huge impact to the health and well-being.
And so these two different kinds of materials, you've taken a strategy of being kind of like an ingredient, right? Or like a textile that other people can use in their end products that go to consumers. So would these live inside synthetic disposable nappies and make them just far better than the current completely synthetic approach? Or would they be inside some kind of cross between a cloth nappy and a synthetic nappy? Like lots of cloth nappies have a plastic outer clip-on layer or something.
Yeah.
How do you see these being used, or how are they looking to be used?
I guess we're quite similar to, I guess, Allbirds, where, they focus on the comfort and performance of the product, and then sustainability comes second. And the same is for all parents want products that work first. And in the past, people have made, natural type materials, but then they haven't worked properly. And so we put a huge emphasis on performance, and that becomes number one. What we've noticed in the hygiene industry is, and when we first started, there was a lot of plastic in these products. And now we're seeing technology come out where you can now replace every single layer of a nappy in a bio-based version. And that's fantastic news, because that then means you can compost those products. What's been missing is that second layer down in a disposable nappy, which could never be made in a bio-based format, because if you use any kind of natural fibre, it will tend to absorb a lot of moisture, and you don't want it to absorb moisture, you want it to repel it. And so we're actually enabling a lot of products now to become fully compostable. And in fact, we're working with brands that are going to the extent of using the best materials so that they can be composted. And, like one of our customers is supplying to hospitals abroad. And what they're doing is they then take those used nappies and they're putting them into a special biodigesting machinery in order to generate energy for those hospitals. So you're getting a full circular process happening there, which we just haven't really seen in the past, and which is really exciting for us, because it's now credible to actually put our materials into these products and know that they're going to be going into products which will be fully biodegradable and compostable, and hopefully home compostable, which our materials actually are.
That is such a hopeful future around the corner, right? Where I imagine as the scale of these things goes up, the price and affordability goes down as well. How does it measure up versus kind of, the unbelievably, it's wrong how cheap a lot of the synthetic materials are, considering all the externalities aren't costed in, whether it's the destabilizing of the countries it comes from, the costs of the transport, the subsidies that we give these industries at every point. But they're kind of crazily cheap.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there to mention. I mean, hygiene products are seen to be very low cost, high volume. But what we've noticed now that we've become essentially textile experts is we've noticed that you can actually, that philosophy which we always embody, which is less is more. If you can imagine, our product is high performing. And if we can increase the performance of products, what that then means is you can take out some of those materials out of those products. So you can use less materials, but what you spend is you put it into things that work extremely well. And that's where our wool products really stack up. So the actual wool fibres themselves, unfortunately, as they stand today, synthetic fibres actually are worth more than our wool fibres. It's crazy. And that can't continue. So we work directly with farmers, and the goal of that is to match brands up with the farmers so they have that full traceability and transparency. It means we can increase the returns back to the farmers. So we actually pay them more to a point where it's actually then profitable for them. And that is exciting for our country, because that money goes back into our country, creates jobs. The other thing on that is, we actually started out, we were going to make our own biodegradable nappy. But when I actually went out into the world, went to a lot of conferences, I noticed it's hugely competitive in the hygiene world. There are big companies, there are small companies. They're all competing for the consumer's money. And we quickly realised, okay, that wasn't going to be the right model for us. If our goal was to use as much wool as possible and to have the biggest impact on the world in terms of environmental impact in a positive way, we decided to switch to that ingredient brand model, a little bit like Gore-Tex is to the rain jackets. So we just had to look at what are we really good at. We're really good at making amazing, high-performing, natural, sustainable materials. Let's work with brands to make their products better. And then that way you're not competing. You're actually going in there in a capacity of helping and supporting to shift the way products are made. And so that's been a really big impact in terms of how we're received around the world. It's going to work extremely well for us and for the New Zealand economy.
Yeah, that's so amazing that it's cost competitive with these materials that are made at such scale with such an industry behind them. And it can provide a better return for farmers than what they're getting for this wool. Like, what's the state of the wool industry today, especially with the with the coarse or strong wool? And where do you see this going?
Yeah, I mean, once upon a time, there were 12 sheep for every person in New Zealand, going back to the 1950s, and now it's like 5 per person. So we've actually lost a lot of sheep. If we make this fly, I would like to see the balance come back with more sheep in New Zealand. Sheep are incredibly robust and they provide incredible diversity on our farms. They are complementary to other farming systems. So diversity is really, really key, I think, for our future. And so farming of sheep, I would like to see increased. It will have I think there's like 100,000 tonnes of clean, strong wool that we have access to, which we perceive that we could use all of that easily. We're in the market of the technical textiles market, which is, these are textiles which are functional. They're not aesthetic. They're not things that, we don't try to make things look pretty. We try to make them functional. That market is a $200 billion market. So in actual fact, I'm almost worried we might run out of wool, which is not a bad problem to have, really. But I think we're going to need to increase our sheep numbers.
Yeah, and so you've just completed or recently completed a capital raise with some great investors coming in to help you now kind of like scale up and head to the world, eh? Tell us about that process. And also, it's been 15 years of like developing this, right? Like 2 years on the initial science and then getting patents and then developing the products and then developing, all kinds of international relationships and customers. And to get to this point, like, how does it feel to have that kind of dream that you had borne out and then backed by some really great investors?
Yeah, I mean, 10, 15 years ago when we started, it was just an idea on a piece of paper, basically, and we didn't really know whether it was going to fly. And of course, I was bringing up 3 children at the time. I had 3 children under the age of 6. When I was sort of starting out developing this company, my mum was fantastic in the wool shed, so she knew everything about wool. She'd often take things out of the pantry and try to cobble things together. And it wasn't until we actually got some initial funding from various groups to actually really work on the science aspect. It's been quite a journey, but yeah, actually getting that investment was evidence that we actually have legs. We can really have an amazing business. And I'm really proud of the investors that we have. It's very diverse. Our lead investor is the first woman-funded VC in New Zealand, Even Capital. They've just been incredibly supportive. And then we've got 2 iwi groups, which I remember saying to them, I would be so proud to have your investment because, I can actually give back to you pretty quickly in terms of if you've got wool, we can source your wool. We can develop an incredible story around the kaitiakitanga process that Māori believe in. And in actual fact, all farmers believe in that, that you need to look after our land. In fact, there's a saying which I just love, which is ka ora te whenua, ka ora te tangata. When the land is healthy, the people are healthy. And that's quite incredible. So I've been very blessed to be able to have their support. They totally understand that we need to be thinking about diversity in Aotearoa and to have products that are circular, they go back to the earth, and to be thinking about our young people as well, investing in education around fibre technology. There's so many opportunities that we could offer down the track. And then we've got some high net worth individuals, which are just incredibly passionate about the environment and business. So business has to cover off making profit. But if you're doing something good as well, that's good for people and the planet, that is an absolute bonus and absolute necessity. So, as I said, 10 years ago, no one really were thinking that much about sustainability, particularly in America. I used to go there. They loved what we were doing. They thought we were amazing. But they were still thinking about the bottom line, and that has completely changed, especially with, in 2019, the European Commission brought out the single-use plastics directive, and basically that highlighted 10 products which are the most ocean-polluting products, and one of those is sanitary products. So that actually gave us the boost to show that we're a credible company, and that we have the ability to turn the wool industry from a sheep to a unicorn.
I love it. And so what will this funding allow, and where do you see this going?
So currently we are trialling with some nappy companies. We've actually been very fortunate that there have been many global companies that have actually come to us. So we haven't actually had to go out and sell this. They just get it. They totally understand. Consumers are wanting better products. They want them to be sustainable. I was one of those parents that was horrified about what was in these products and wanted better for my children. And many parents are exactly the same. You want the best for your children. Same if you've got a pet. These products are also used for pets, and often people with pets will spend more than on children. So there's lots of different applications. I think with being an ingredient supplier, what that also offers is the ability for many companies to contact us to talk about their product that they want to launch using our materials. And we are noticing that. We're noticing a huge sort of increase in entrepreneurship around the world of people saying, totally understand what you're doing. We totally need these materials now. We can't be thinking about that buying the cheapest product is the best. And for parents buying any kind of hygiene product, they do need them to work extremely well. And that is a very key driver. So the sustainability is definitely a supporting aspect of that. If you can get something that works well and actually is sustainable, then people are 100% behind that.
Wow. And what would your advice be for people who do spot an opportunity? And because there must have been many stops along the way where you've had to be, break down the doors to make this happen, make people think about things in new ways. You've done a fantastic job of, building up the science and the IP portfolio and the patents by, working with heaps of grants and the like. And all of that is so hard ahead of significant revenue and the like, and takes, so much belief to make something new possible. What would your advice be for someone who does see a better way?
Yeah, I think many people would be like me when I started out, which is, who am I to make a change in the world? What can I really offer? And I used to say, It's so random that I went from an IT industry. I mean, I'd come from building electronic data loggers and jet planes and building computer systems for all sorts of different companies and agencies around the world. And then I had children and saw a need in the world and had a purpose. We all have a North Star that we aim for, and sometimes you don't know what that is, but when you discover it, it's hard to let it go. So if you're really passionate about something, I wouldn't be thinking about, hey, what do I know? What skills do I have? If you're curious, anybody can actually do it. It's just actually asking questions. I don't need to be a textile expert. There are some amazing scientists, and it's taken a team of people. I've got an incredible team. We've got people around the world that are world experts in the hygiene industry, and it's not my job to understand every single thing. I only need to ask them a question, and people are willing to offer up their help and advice. So I would just say, just get started, try it. If it doesn't work out, that's fine. You move on to something else. And for me, I had tried a lot of different things in my lifetime. I had lots of ideas, and none of them really flew. I quickly dropped them. But this was the one thing that I knew was what I was designed and born to do, and had everything in my background to make it fly. And I guess anyone who knows me will know that when I put my mind to something, I actually do it.
Magic. And as a final thought, Derelee, what will success be for you personally and for Woolchemy?
I will be dancing when I see the first wool product on the shelves, and which is very, very close by, actually. You'll actually start to see some products out in the industry or out in the supermarkets as early as next year, which I'm really excited about. And so, if I can achieve that, that will be just give me such kudos and make it all worthwhile. And my husband will be overjoyed as well, because he's really had to back me on all this. And my children have, seen me working out in shipping containers as I do my bit of chemistry outside, and hopefully it's an inspiration for them as well. But for Woolchemy, I want this to be $1 billion company. I want this to be big, and it has to be big, because the wool industry needs it, Aotearoa needs it, our environment needs it. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to generating the $100 million revenue within the next 5 to 10 years.
I can't wait to see where you take it next. Thank you so much for sharing your story today. Kia ora.
Kia ora, thanks very much.
Thank you so much to Derelee Potroz-Smith. Thank you for listening, and for everyone who helps make this happen, like our producer Samuel Robinson. Do follow Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to rate and leave a review if you like what we do. E noho rā.